The NBA trade deadline, it's fast approaching. We expect the Hornets to move around some pieces. Just how many pieces do we expect them to move around? We rummage through the Sicko Satchel and answer your questions on the trade deadline today. Plus, you can watch the Hornets for free. Novel concept. Exciting edition of Locked On Hornets.
What?
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, Doug has been bringing up the aesthetic lately with the outfits, with the honeycomb scarf now. I mean, you look really good. You continue to look a little more sophisticated. I don't know what Locked On NBA has done to you, but I like it. I like what Locked On NBA has done for you, and I appreciate you.
What did I send you? What did I send you yesterday? I don't do this for the money. I don't even do this because I love it. I do this because of the validation that I get from strangers, and so the dress is part of that. You know, I wear the scarf a lot and during the winter, and I get a lot of compliments on it, and then I respond, "Yeah, it's Charlotte Hornets," and then they respond, "Oh, what's that now?"
Yeah. Huh? I'm sorry. What is that? Doug Branson.
And I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, so that kind of makes sense. But I feel like the same thing would happen in Charlotte, and maybe after they put these games on for free, that will stop happening.
Everyhornetsboxscore.com. Go check it out so you know about the Charlotte Hornets. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. This episode is brought to you by nothing, in fact, so we appreciate nobody today. But I will tell you that we do have a Locked On Hornets newsletter. It's your new daily Locked On Hornets newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets newsletter. All right, Doug, it feels like we've been waiting for this checkpoint for quite some time, like ever since there was a 2-week stretch of the Hornets losing and losing and losing badly and losing competitively, but still losing. It felt like the next checkpoint for us to get to was the NBA trade deadline. What was going to change about this roster? Well, it's fast approaching. Here we are, January 15th as of this episode. The trade deadline is February 6th. 3 p.m. Eastern time is when no more trades will be able to go through unless you're already on the call, whatever. There are some details you can get through, but 3 p.m. February 6th. We have a lot of trade deadline questions in the Sicko Satchel. You are going to get the first segment, people. Congratulations to you, Doug. Tell us what kind of questions we need to answer today.
Little triple S, a Sicko Satchel special, and actually a quadruple S because this first one comes to us from longtime listener and supporter of the podcast, Schumann of the 22nd Mullins Regiment. And this is not only a question, he's written us a little screenplay here. Open with a scene from Arrested Development. Carl Weathers is mentoring Jeff Peterson at the office. And Carl says, whoa, there's still some time left on this trade deadline. You take that, an expiring contract, young talent, and some cash considerations, and baby, you got a trade package going. The question is, what do you think the best case scenario would be for the Charlotte Hornets at the trade deadline?
One, it's one of the shows that I'm ashamed to say that I have never seen. Most people tell me that it is fantastic, and it's one of the Nada would always get on me for not having seen The Wire. It is something that I wear. I understand that is shameful. Arrested Development is one of the comedies, the sitcoms that people shame me for never have seen. So I do not know that, but I'm sure it sounds hilarious. Doug, if you want to go with the perfect scenario, what does that look like for you at the trade deadline? Like, what does it look like for you, what Jeff Peterson and the Charlotte Hornets team accomplishes?
Yeah, man, I think the realistic best case scenario is that they come away with a first round pick somehow. I don't know that that's going to happen. I wouldn't put the probabilities like crazy low that happens, but I think it would take a desperate team in a desperate situation trying to make a larger deal happen. It wouldn't be about the player that the Hornets would be sending being worthy of a first round pick. It would simply be the reward that the Charlotte Hornets would get from taking on either bad money or just helping to facilitate the deal in some way. So I think that's best case scenario. Another best case scenario I would throw out in lieu of not getting the first round pick would be some situation where they got a younger player from a team that maybe was full of young players like Houston. I don't know that they would do a deal with Utah. Utah's got a few young players that are trying to scratch in some minutes, and we're going to see a few of them tonight. We'll get to the preview a little bit later in the show. But if they come away with a young player that just hasn't been getting burned and could possibly be a little gem for the Hornets next season, I think that's a best case scenario too.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know how logical this is, but it's something I feel, and I'm just going to go ahead and spit it out on this podcast.
Spit it.
Something that I would like to see, Doug, because I think that makes sense for the Hornets in too many trade deadline scenarios, because the Hornets have been losing for a lot of seasons in a row now. So it's always the young reclamation project. It's always the draft assets. And finally, they picked a lane last year when new ownership came in and said, hey, we're getting picks, guys. Like, this is enough of getting Brad Wanamaker, enough of getting cash considerations. Like, we're getting picks. So I'm glad they picked the lane. That was smart business from this Hornets team. Still love the way they operated there. Part of me wants a player that is just bona fide and good at his specific role and can make that transition into clearly retooling, rebuilding, whatever you want to call this, into the other side of taking that next step and just kind of getting ahead of the curve to some degree with a role player like that. So Grant Williams, maybe a player of that ilk, another one at a different position that comes in off of the bench or starts and maybe in place of Josh Green, who I thought was good for a while. I thought he was unfairly criticized. Not unfairly. I shouldn't say that. But I was still a Josh Green fan enough. Now it's just way to miss instead of hit or miss with Josh Green lately. So I've not been as thrilled with his play. But you get what I'm saying? Like, I want a player that comes in. Can you get somewhat of a shooter? Can you get, I know 3-and-D is everybody's rage, right? Like, oh yeah, baby, let's bring in a 3-and-D guy. Every team in the NBA could use that. I just wonder if you would sacrifice some kind of like second round pick. Maybe would you sacrifice multiple second round picks in these 4-5 team deals and instead just get a player that's a veteran that another team could offload and not really worry about, and you still take on some money, which means you don't get a couple second round picks, and that guy actually just see it through to whatever that next level you take is on the other side. So you get ahead of the curve because you got some talent on this team. It's not like it's completely void of talent, right? You have LaMelo, you have Brandon Miller. The idea is that you have Mark Williams. So if you had another player that could come in and help and really shore up your rotation, I think that's something I would like. I know it's crazy. Get a decent basketball player. I know it's not necessarily the lane that it feels like this team should be taking, yet that is what I feel about getting a player that could see the other side of this retool, this rebuild, or just get us to the next step, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to navigate because you don't want to bring in a veteran that makes you too good, I think, at this point in the season. But it could be nice to bring in someone and let them get a little bit of a head start, kind of like what Grant Williams and Trey Mann got last season after the trade deadline. You give them a little bit of a head start to get to know the team, and then they can hit the ground running in the next season, although, of course, unfortunately, both of those players have been out for a significant time. I think we should note that this will not be the same kind of trade deadline that we saw last year where the Hornets were getting both of those things that I mentioned. They were getting first-round picks, and they were getting some interesting young players. That won't happen because you don't have the same kind of assets. Like, Terry Rozier, it's hard to believe after his time in Miami, but he was he was an asset when they traded him. Same too with PJ Washington. Like there was stuff to send out that made a lot of sense for teams. That's not going to be a similar case this season.
Yeah, and I wish I had a better example. I will say it feels like they kind of did that last year with Trey Mann and Grant Williams on top of the picks. Look, the Hornets, they're not a good basketball team right now. They only have 8 wins. I saw the tweet that the Hornets have had the same exact record through 36 games the last 2 years in a row. So that's something.
That's consistency, folks. Everybody's looking for it, and the Hornets found it. Consistency.
You cheers to the camera. Yeah, baby. That was a reaction from you. You cheers the camera with the consistency that the Hornets have. So they've done this before. Maybe you just do it again somehow. Trade deadline, you got some real NBA players because you were playing guys like, Nathan Mensah, who is my prime example. I apologize for that. You were playing some G Leaguers, but you get some picks and you get Grant and you get Trey Mann, who are valuable players on this team now, right? Like you hit two. You hit Micic last year, not so much this year, but you hit him last year. Is there a way that you can you just copy and paste it? Maybe that's what I want, Doug. That would make some sense to me. Can you copy and paste what you did last year and apply it to this season? You give me 2 deadlines like that, I'll feel pretty decent.
I'm just saying so what I'm saying is I think that's going to be difficult because of what they have going. Like if Micic had gone and done what he did at the end of last season and taken that into the beginning of this season, well, now we can talk because there was some, interest from Denver, but I think all that interest is gone. I think he's going to end up, going back to Europe. The NBA experiment didn't really work out for Micic. So I think that's but worse, I don't know what the best case scenario is necessarily, but I know what the worst case scenario is, and that's doing nothing and believing that this version of the team needs more time or you need to evaluate. I think we've gotten plenty of evaluation. This thing is not working, and they need to, find every opportunity to shuffle this roster up minus LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. Get what you can. You've already got a couple of first-round picks in your belt already, and take that into the summer. I
think my scenario, I guess it would have to be Miles, right? You could get that kind of, maybe not the first-round pick like you got from PJ, but you'd get something valuable for a Miles trade, something enough. And so feels like Miles would be the guy, and after that, I don't want to get rid of Trey Mann. So Trey Mann would bring in something a little interesting, but I don't want to get rid of Trey Mann. So, yeah, it is going to be tough. You want to do one more question before we move on, or you just want to move on to the second segment?
We've been talking a lot about Miles Bridges. You just mentioned him there. Let's do one more on the other side, and then we'll get to this TV news.
You heard the man. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
More trade deadline discussion and free Hornets basketball. No, I'm not talking about overtime. It's a beautiful thing. We'll get to that coming up next. Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Hungryroot. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had this ongoing problem. I just don't have the time to grocery shop between work, life, trying to eat healthier. I was constantly feeling stressed out. You'd go to the grocery store, buy things you don't really need, then end up with no time to actually cook. Sticking with health goals, too, it's impossible. That was a struggle also. But everything changed when I discovered Hungryroot. Honestly, it's been a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungryroot, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of your grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based on taste and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein, gluten-free options, all of it. And the best part, every meal ready in 15 minutes or less. Beautiful. I'm talking quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to your door. It's been a huge time saver and has made healthy eating so much simpler. You're going to love Hungryroot as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. It feels like those crazy billboards that said, I just want free gas for life. And you said, nah, it's too good to be true. I'm sure something has to happen that's crazy. No, just sign up. Locked On NBA. You get a free item of your choice for life with Hungryroot. That's a crazy offer. Hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, lead us, Doug, where you want to take us with another Sicko Satchel question. And also, this has been something that you've also been talking about as well, just wanting to watch the games for free. I think we all feel it, but this has been a personal project of yours to tell the people exactly what's going on with the NBA, the bag of cash, the regional sports networks, all of it. Feels like we are taking a necessary step to giving fans free basketball.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to that, but let's get to this first. 736 text in on the joinsubtext.com/LockedOnHornets Sicko Brigade Sicko Satchel. Is Miles Bridges all but gone? Very simple question, Walker.
Yeah, here we go.
Is the answer simple?
No, I do not think that he's all but gone. I absolutely don't think that. There's a real shot that he sticks around with this squad. I think for a head coach, we've seen it with Steve Clifford, and I think Charles Lee realizes this as well. Miles Bridges has been somebody on the court that doesn't give up, and he still, to me, gives a lot of effort in the second halves of games where they're down 30, they're down 20, or it's even keel, and you're diving for loose balls with Kevin Durant on the other side, and you're beating him to the ground, you're fouling him, you're defending him hardcore because you want a victory. So I think that's valuable for this team. There is a skill set that he brings where he can get to the rim, and that's his strength still, getting him downhill and just giving basically, here you go, Bull. Here's an open lane to get to the rack. Go finish with some physicality. Brandon Miller, that's not his game. LaMelo Ball, that's not his game. Josh Green can do it in transition, but not to the level in the half court like Miles can. So there are a few reasons as to why you might want to hold on to Miles. The other thing is this contract only gets more valuable. The contract only gets more tradable the more that his contract goes on, because you're talking about a descending value contract with it being $27 million this year. Then it goes to like what, 25, and then basically 22.9, I believe, at the very end of his 3-year deal. So this is not a contract that you have to get off of right now and capitalize, strike while the iron's hot. This is always going to be a tradable contract. So no, I do not think Miles is all but gone. I think it's a big possibility, but right now, to me, Doug, it's 50-50 whether Miles is on this team. And maybe even if I had to lean one way or the other, I might lean more towards Miles being on this team post-trade deadline.
Yeah, I think the situation is if that right deal comes along, and I really believe that if a deal for Miles happens, it's going to be the Hornets getting involved in another deal because the CBA has made it very difficult to move guys like Jimmy Butler or Zach LaVine and get those large numbers on a contending team's roster. So I think the Hornets could come away with something that they wouldn't be able to come away with otherwise in just a straight up deal for Miles Bridges. And then the other team gets a player that is playing better. He's scoring nearly 21 points per game in his last 5. It's not super efficient. He's 41.5% from the field, 30.6% from 3, but it's not apocalyptic. And he's been doing a ton on the defensive end of the floor. Like, you can sell him as a two-way player for sure. So, yeah, I think it's 50-50 as well. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. You want to talk some free basketball?
So the Hornets, this is going to be news to a lot of people, but we did report on this at the beginning of before the season ever started. Shelley Kayette Weston, who is the new president of the Charlotte Hornets, taking over for Fred Whitfield, announced that this was going to be a thing that the Hornets did, putting Hornets games, 5 of them, on local television, over the air, antenna. Get the bunny ears out, folks. You're going to be able to watch 5 games. We just didn't know which games and where you could watch those, and now we know that the 5 games are going to be January 27th against the Lakers. That's going to be on WSOC, Channel 9. January 31st against the Clippers. That's going to be on TV 64. February 5th against the Bucks. That's also going to be on TV 64. February 27th against the Mavs. And then March 3rd against the Warriors. That's going to be on WSOC. So free basketball. This is an agreement that the NBA made with the Diamond Sports Group that has their regional sports network that has relationships with 13 teams, including the Charlotte Hornets. But then they went belly up. They went bankrupt. They've been working their way through Chapter 11. And so the NBA said, all right, while you're doing this, we're going to do our best to keep this train going. But you've got to give us a little bit of leeway here and let some teams experiment with putting games on local television. This will be the first time the Hornets, then Bobcats, were on TV since the 07-08 season.
I know. Oh, my God. 07-08. It's crazy to think that it's been that long. So because of this, the 5 Hornets games that you mentioned will be available to an estimated 1.3 million homes in the Charlotte region. This is a simulcast, too, by the way. So when you mentioned WSOC TV, when you mentioned TV 64, these games will still be on the FanDuel Sports Network. And because this is simulcast, it also means that you're still getting your broadcast crew, your normal broadcast crew. You're going to get Eric Collins. You're going to get Del Curry. And you're you're going to get Shannon Spake for these 5 games, and that is a beautiful thing. We need to give Eric Collins away for free. Like, we need, you want your ratings to go up, you want your Hornets ratings to go up. Eric Collins needs to be easily accessible, but Doug is giving me a little bit of a face of worry, and I don't know why. Tell me why.
And not worry. I hear you, and you saying that the people need EC for free, I think is a great argument, and I'm not going to argue against it. But the nostalgic part of me, the kid that fell in love with the Charlotte Hornets before he fell in love with any other sports team, who had a black and white television, portable television that he put on his bookshelf and tuned the little bunny ear, the one bunny ear that it had, tuned it to Waxen 64 to hear Steve Martin and Mike Jaminski on the call. I kind of want to just wake those guys up one time for one of these games, get them on TV 64, and let me hear Martin and Jaminski do it one more time. Come on.
Oh, man. They are. Jaminski, not so much. Steve Martin is way far out of the game. He tried to get out of the game. They had to bring him back because of some things going on with the broadcast space within the Hornets franchise. And then he finally was able to retire again. But I hear you. It's nice to transition to just another legend. And we've talked about it. We've been real fortunate to have broadcast legends all across the board. So we'll get to see Eric Collins, Del Curry again. It's a simulcast, so it's the same crew.
So this is super important. We've done a few jokes here, but this is super important because I believe that the NBA and the teams that got in bed with regional sports networks and put essentially games behind a paywall did themselves a short-term favor, particularly teams like the Hornets, who are going to always be behind the 8 ball in terms of making money. They did themselves a short-term favor by going to the RSNs and saying, hey, you give us a giant bag of cash and we'll put programming on your network. Deal? Great. The problem is that long-term, it ate into a fan base. I mean, you look at the comments when the Hornets tweeted about this, and it's constantly like, put all the games there. They know, the NBA knows that piracy on these games is way up because nobody's paying for cable anymore. So that means nobody's paying for FanDuel Sports Network. And so the rot that has occurred in these local fan bases is real, and it's hurting the national numbers too. Because if you don't care about your local team, why are you going to tune into ESPN or TNT for some of these other teams? Like, it all trickles up. And that's what's happened in the NBA. So this is important. If you can watch these games locally, do it. And I would say also, if you're a season ticket holder, reach out to your rep and say, love this. Please keep doing this more. Email the Hornets. Find some way to contact this team and say, we love this. We want to keep this going all 82 next season on local TV so that you can get your fan base back when you actually win basketball games.
You're spot on with the reaction. The world famous WFNZ text line. We broke this news when we got the press release, and then the text line flooded in with all of these texts saying, great, 5 games, whoop-de-doo. It was a 50-50 mix of, yay, thank God, finally this is the right decision. And then the other 50% was saying, hey, how about we do it for 80 games? But after a while, that other 50% would come in a little bit later and say, this is a good thing. I am excited about it. I just want this to happen for the rest of the season. So people are here for it. When we talk about the ratings, the NBA ratings discussion this year, with them being so far down, this is a reason as to why as well.
Yes.
So
not as well. People complain about the three-point shooting. That's not what the problem is. People complain about Charles Barkley and Shaq not knowing what they're talking about. That is not the problem. Those are just like people are looking at the top of the iceberg and not understanding that below the surface of the water is this idea that the NBA said to fans, you got to pay exorbitant amounts to see your basketball team. No longer can you watch them for free. And people said, no thanks.
Yeah, they did say no thanks. If you wanted to argue that the NBA doesn't have as much cachet because LeBron is aging, there's no Michael Jordan, the star power, whatever, right? Like, that one is a little bit harder to understand, but okay, maybe that is a small percentage. But I do agree with you. Like, this is the reason why, because you got to pay. Look, FanDuel Sports Network, they gave me a paycheck. I appreciate them for having me on the Rockets broadcast. Thank you, FanDuel Sports Network. It's not even really their fault. What's happening is you're charging $20 a month to take in one product. So when you pay $20 a month for other streaming services, you have this smorgasbord of all sorts of content, movies, TV shows, whatever you want, even special occasion sports broadcasts like a Netflix. And yet, when you pay $20 a month for FanDuel Sports Network, you're only doing it for the Hornets. So you're talking about $100 for NBA season, essentially, to just watch the 82 games that you're going to get from Charlotte basketball. And that's it. So a lot of people are bowing out. A lot of people are deciding, hey, I'm not going to do this. What's interesting to me, Doug, is when you have Christmas Day games going on and you see the ratings actually go up quite a bit, despite NFL football being on Christmas Day, and NBA ratings are up for the Christmas Day games that are taking place in the association, it means that there is kind of an appetite for basketball still. You still have that out there. But again, nobody wants to pay the $20 a month, or not many people want to pay $20 a month. So you've been hustling backwards for so long. You have been making sure that you diminish the pool of Hornets fans or regional sports fans as much as possible. And now you're paying the price. Except they were paying the price, and then they decided not to pay the price. Now you are. So I'm glad this is happening. Hopefully we get 80 games of this. Feels like we're making headway. 5 games, great. Hopefully it can be 80 next year. We'll see. But it's a beautiful thing, and the fans, whether you react to it with sarcasm, you react with sarcasm because you care. And that's something that the NBA has to like see. Even the sarcastic comments, you have to like seeing that because it means they care.
It means they care, and it also means that this is super obvious, and it also means that they've been complaining about it for years and nobody has been listening to them.
That's right.
And then when the Hornets put out something that says, like, in all bold letters, everyone can watch, ! It's just like a hilarious admission that not everyone could watch before and will not continue to watch after the, in between and after these 5 games are over. So hopefully everyone can watch can just be the mantra that the new ownership group takes up when next season or whatever this FanDuel thing runs out. I'm just afraid that FanDuel seems to be pulling themselves, with the help of Amazon, seems to be pulling themselves out of this bankruptcy, and things are just going to go back to status quo. But hopefully, and I will say too, I'm glad that Lakers, Clippers, Bucks, Mavs, Warriors are the matchups. Like, give these broadcasts an opportunity to succeed instead of putting, Wizards or whatever other programming on there. Like, these should succeed. I hope they do, and I hope we see 10, 15, 25 next season.
Great planning. Hey, it's real easy. What games do we broadcast? Let's go after the big names. Let's go after the teams that probably have a fan base here in Charlotte because they're household franchise names. And I just pay attention to the volume of people. Like, it's astonishing to me, Doug. You're around it with Every Hornets Boxscore, with the YouTube comment section, with just being in the Hornets space. It's astonishing just how many people will tell me I'd watch the Hornets if they were on television. If I was flipping through channels just like the good old days and I saw Hornets basketball on, I'd stop and land there. I wouldn't even change it through commercials because I don't want to miss any action. But I've got to make financial decisions based on how I consume television. And one of the things that's going to be left off of my plate, it's going to be Hornets basketball. It's going to be Atlanta Braves baseball. They're not going to watch Braves baseball. I know plenty of Braves fans, like diehard Braves fans, that aren't paying for it because they
that's why that's why they went into Chapter 11, because no one was going to pay for the plus subscription $20 a month to watch sports. They're going to pay for Netflix. They're going to pay for all these other services. They're not going to pay $100+ a month to whatever cable service just because they want to watch their team. It's absurd. This is crazy.
Shelly Kayette Weston seems like she's on the ball and has been ever since she took over team president. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Let's preview the game, Charlotte against Utah. What do we expect from this Hornets-Jazz matchup? That's still to come here on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, There's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering, refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. There's something for every style and every home. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals as well. If you're still sticking to those New Year's resolutions, it's been a couple weeks. Maybe people have bowed out. Maybe it'll be people
I am. And I'll tell you, I can give you a report from the gym that people have started to bow out. Like you can tell the resolving, it's been a little bit easier to find the machines that I want to find. The resolving is resolving.
Well, Wayfair can help you stick with it if you're decluttering and trying to bring your home a little decor with your own flavor on it. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Hornets-Jazz. This is another game on the West Coast road trip. They've only got a couple games more before they play the Jazz. They play the Bulls on the road, so they're on their way back to the East Coast, and then they're in for a long homestand. This is going to be the weird part of the schedule once we saw schedule release day, where you have a million games at home and then you have a million games on the road. So we're about to enter that, but we have a couple more games to go before we get there.
Yeah, and I wonder if that home stretch is going to be broken up eventually by the rescheduling of the Lakers and Clippers game that they never got to. So we'll see how they work all of that out.
Maybe.
This Jazz game is not going to be very interesting if you're a Jazz fan because everyone's out. Clarkson, Collins, John Collins, Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen already declared out, questionable. Keontae George, and Sexton is out for rest. So obviously Utah using this opportunity against the Hornets, who only have 2 less wins than them, to maybe catch up a little bit in the race for Cooper Flagg. But for the Hornets, I think this is very interesting because I think LaMelo Ball needs some really good games. He needs to get his 3-point shot back on track, and I think he needs some wins to convince some of the fringe media that are negotiable with that haven't already decided that LaMelo Ball doesn't deserve an All-Star bid, and to help his case with players that he deserves to be an All-Star. I mean, I think a lot of media are out on LaMelo Ball as an All-Star. They are offended. They are offended that LaMelo Ball is leading the East guard vote. But I think there are still a few media members that are voting on this thing that could be persuaded if he goes on a little run here heading into the All-Star break.
Yeah, remember at the beginning of the season when Zach Lowe was still in our lives and our lives were beautiful then. Now it's not happening after the layoffs, and we just talked about this yesterday, how we had the Woj replacement with Shams. You mentioned this point via the group text, but we have not had the Zach Lowe replacement, and that sucked. Somebody that watches all of the games, that's just an NBA sicko, right? Like Zach, we mentioned how sick we are, and look, I'd put our sickness up against anybody's. But Zach Lowe taking all sorts of basketball in, true sicko. We have different forms for what it was that Zach Lowe gave us. We don't have that exactly anymore, and I do miss it. All that to say, one of his points at the beginning of the season was maybe this Hornets team would be a Utah Jazz type of candidate, where the last couple of years Utah would get off to a hot start. They realized, man, if we do make the playoffs, we're just going to get bounced immediately. We won high draft picks. This whole winning thing is not necessarily for us. And so they made a pointed direction to start losing more basketball games. The Hornets were not good enough to be Utah. They did not accidentally contend for a playoff spot. That did not happen. And Utah this year, they're not good enough. Utah is one of the worst teams in the league as well. They are 10-28 after a win against Brooklyn, by the way. Utah is 10-28. So interesting parallels to make. I think both of these teams are in somewhat similar situations where Utah still has a guy like Lauri Markkanen, who you want to build around, but also if you do trade him, it's going to be for like a huge trade package in return. Like, so they have some talent in some ways, but they still need to build off of it. I do find some parallels between these teams.
Yeah, for sure. I've been getting a lot of questions, and maybe we talk about this tomorrow after the Jazz recap. I've been getting a lot of questions in the realm of why haven't the Charlotte Hornets performed more like Orlando, who lost nearly every significant piece that they had at some point for many weeks. Paolo finally back, but they're still without Franz Wagner. They lost both Wagners. Mo Wagner is out for the season, I believe, with an ACL injury. Jalen Suggs is out, but they've still been winning. They're still threatening to be top 3 if they're not already there in the Eastern Conference. So that's crazy. Then you look at New Orleans, they've also suffered a ton of injuries this season. And while they're not very good, they're still out there capable of beating good teams occasionally. They even hung around with Boston and made that a close game. So why can't the Hornets be like that? I don't want to dig into that right now because we have to go, but I'm just going to put a pin in that and say, let's talk about that tomorrow, because I think there are significant differences in those circumstances. But media has used that to punish LaMelo. Like, LaMelo should be making this team better. There was a funny discussion on Real Ones, which is a Ringer podcast with Raja Bell, former Charlotte player, played for the Bobcats. And Howard Beck was just going in on LaMelo Ball. And I'm telling you, if Howard Beck has watched, I bet he's watched one, but if he's watched 2 Hornets games this season, 2 entire Hornets games, I will eat my hat. I'll eat 3 hats back here on the hat tree if Howard Beck has watched 2 Charlotte Hornets games, all 48 minutes. How many is that? 96 minutes of Hornets basketball. I don't think so. So he was going in on LaMelo Ball. And then Raja Bell was like, yeah, but this team bleeping sucks. And that's not LaMelo's fault. It's like, yes. What are we doing? I mean, his averages right now are nearly 30 points per game, 7.4 assists, and 5+ rebounds. Like that, you don't do that on accident. I understand the efficiency's down, but you don't do that on accident. Those are great numbers, and it's crazy to me that so many people call him empty calories. Well, it's just not the case.
This is the Zach Lowe portion of it. It feels like I'm not even trying to agree with the dude for confirmation bias sake. Zach agrees with me, therefore he's right and he watches the games. It's not, I guess, how I'm trying
That's me.
to go
I
about
would do
this.
that.
I know. But it did feel like, Zach would include clips, right? that was his thing starting at Grantland. He would include these clips in his articles, making his point that you could watch these little 5-10 second like coaching clips that you run through, right? It's what you see coaches grind through, and it was really cool. So he would include that with guys like LaMelo, and then he was always telling you, man, I can't quit LaMelo. When you're that big, you have access to any pass you want, and you have the vision to make any pass you want. It's just so incredibly rare, on top of the shooting ability that he so clearly possesses. Watching him with this Hornet squad, this is why I can't quit him, while everybody else goes to Basketball Reference, and then they start to see the efficiency from 3 go down just a little bit, and then that's all you need to quit LaMelo. Like, that's all you need to see is the 3-point percentage, because it's what people keep pointing to. The shot diet's crazy. It can get wild. I'm not even here to disagree entirely. The shot selection can get freaking wild with LaMelo. But so many times I hear people point to the 3-point percentage and efficiency going down in that regard, and then just using that as the sole example as to why to keep him out. And I'm telling you to please watch the game, and you might have other reasons that you find. You might. But I think it's going to be hard pressed for you, and I know how many games you're watching, depending on the stats that you point to with LaMelo.
All right, we're going to talk about this again tomorrow, but I just have to say this for the people, and I know not many people listening to this show feel this way, but this is just me talking to people that aren't even listening to this show. But if you're talking about LaMelo's shot diet and his efficiency and how many 3-pointers he's taking and how many of them he's missing, I just would like you to understand that nobody popped off. Brandon Miller did not pop off in his second year like we thought he would. Miles Bridges, his 3-point shooting is in the tank. Same with Josh Green. And Cody Martin has been a little bit better, but Vasa Micic fell off the earth. Grant Williams was injured. Trey Mann, who would be doing a lot of scoring and a lot of pass receiving from LaMelo Ball, he's been out. Like, who out there would he be passing to? They don't have one single big that can shoot a 3-point shot. Who would he pass to? Answer that, Howard Beck.
That's your Hornets-Jazz recap. Preview, I should say. That's your preview for the Jazz game. All of that. Hopefully you can apply those notes and make big financial decisions via FanDuel on that. All right, make sure you're making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube, Doug Ranson, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Also check them out on Locked On NBA. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. If you don't check us out on Wes and Walker, then you miss our interviews like the one we had with DaBaby yesterday. That's right. And I can't say that name without sounding totally ridiculous. So when you call him Baby, it's a lot easier. Like that just flows. That feels like within the normal realm of conversation. But when I have to say DaBaby, it makes me feel very weird saying that. But anyways, you could hear it because we interviewed him. Hornets stuff, big Hornets fan, talked about his track pants in the Bop music video that went viral, had like 550 million views. So some fun Hornet stuff we talked with him about as well. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.
Howard Beck, got my eyes on you.